One of the challenges that we often hear from in organizations is that of creating a good, clean, and solid risk register. The problem is this. The typical approach is you get executives in a room and you interview them for the risks that the organization might be subject to. The problem is that analysis and interview process is subject to recency. They remember risks that happened yesterday better than a month ago. Skew, which has to do with their viewpoint on the organization and the organization strategy. The illusion of control, because if you feel you have control over an issue, it doesn't feel like there's a risk, and so forth. So an alternative that we found useful is to take a list of generic risks, call it a risk category list, tweak it to the organization, and use that. Let me explain how that works. So what we should be able to do is take a common framework for risks, let's say this one which seems to be rooted in ISO 31000, and we're going to adjust that around what this particular organization would like based on their perception of strategy and which of those risks pertain to them. So they've sorted out categories like operational, technical, external, project, financial, organizational, and so forth, and then subcategories within those. Then what we can do is, well, I should step back for a sec. There are many other risk frameworks which are available. The one I described to you, but thousands of others. So on this web page, there'll also be a download where you can access other common frameworks like those you're looking at and figure out which one comes closest to your organization. None of them are necessarily right or wrong. They're just different people's opinions about risk categories. So once you've chosen your category and fine-tuned it, what you should be able to do is, in this case with these 6 major categories, take your strategic objectives and sort of list them down the left side of a spreadsheet. And across the top, those risk categories that you've chosen. And what we're going to do is take a look to see how each of those risk categories is impacting your strategy. Here, I'll make that a bit bigger so we can see what we're talking about here. So in this case, we have the risk category of financial. Within that, we have subcategories, in this case, funding. Now we're going to ask ourselves the standard risk question of what is the likelihood of a financial funding issue occurring. In this example, it's a 2 out of 5. Then what we're going to go do is do the same risk rating on the impact from 1 to 5, but not overall, but specifically by each of the areas that risk touches. So what is the funding impact on profitable growth would be an example. And so based on that, we'll be able to multiply the weighting by the impact to produce that little bar chart. The length of the bar represents the strategically weighted impact of that risk. So what you'll see if you look horizontally is things like product quality has a risk that seems to occur across multiple categories. So that overall objective is probably at risk, whereas others like developing new products doesn't seem to be too risky for this organization based on the subset of categories that we're looking at. Now, what we can also do is sort of add those up to give us a Harvey ball that represents the overall aggregate risk by that category. So in this case, funding, the Harvey ball is empty. It shows not much risk relative to the others. Under capacity, you can see we have a 1/4 Harvey ball. In this case, leadership has decided to consider only those which are half, like this one here, 3/4, or full, in terms of they're looking at second, third, and fourth quartiles of where the category manifests risk. So in this case, it means that we would need to take a look at risk categories of rates, availability, and reliability. And again, what we're trying to do is get away from the skew of those people being interviewed. We now know we should be exploring and looking for financial rate risks, operational availability risks, and operational reliability risks in the organization. So that begins to allow us to take this analysis and compare it to your existing risk register. So in some cases, you'll find that risk already exists in the register, in which case, give yourself a green check mark. In some cases, the risk doesn't exist. So by the time we're done the analysis, in this case, we found 4 areas where we have categories of risk that we did not identify on the previous risk register. So we should take the existing register and work that forward by adding in those risks that we've identified that are above and beyond what we initially had. Or, of course, take those off where risks have left the organization based on, changes in risk profile for whatever reason. So this is a technique you can use to update your risk registry and use that as part of your risk analysis work.